Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today I'm going to teach you how to create a ringed planet complete with Saturn-like rings around it. A couple of important notes. Number one, the star field in the background and the planet that you see, I have already done tutorials on how to create those. I have links in the description below on 1, the star field, and 2, creating the planet. Feel free to go back and look at those before continuing on, because this won't make sense since I'm only creating the rings around the planet in this tutorial. Second, I am using Photoshop CC 2015. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, some of the effects may not work as expected. And last, I am using Windows. If you're using a Mac, then when I say hit the Control key on your keyboard, that means hit the Command key. And when I say hit the Alt key on the keyboard, that means hit the Option key. So with that out of the way, and seeing where we are right now with a planet floating in a star field in space, we are going to create the rings around this gas planet. Now, the way that we're going to do that at first is we're going to hide the planet layer right here, because we don't need to see that at the moment. What we are going to need to see are guidelines that are in the center of our image. So we're going to bring our guides in from the top and the left side. Now, in order to do that, though, you do need to have your rulers showing. So you can hit Control R on the keyboard to bring up the rulers, or you can go up here to View and go down here to Rulers and make sure it has a little check mark. Once you see your rulers, you can click on the ruler itself and then drag down to make your ruler in the center. And then you can click on the left-hand ruler and drag that to the center till it snaps in place like that, and then let go, and you now have the center point of your image. Once we have that, we're going to create a brand new layer on our layers palette, and we're going to name this Gradient. Okay, once we have that, we are going to go to our gradient tool by hitting G on the keyboard, or by going to the gradient tool over here on your toolbar, and we are going to make sure that we are on radial gradient. Mode is normal, opacity is 100%, reverse is unchecked, dither and transparency are both checked. You can then click directly on that gradient to bring up the gradient editor, and then what we are going to do is make sure that our gradient type is noise. Our roughness, we want to make this 60% so that we can see more differentiation between each of the different colors. We want to make the color mode, make sure that that is RGB. Restrict colors and add transparency are both unchecked. And then you just hit randomize until you see a color scheme that you like with your planet. Now, I have a red and yellowish planet, so I want to stick with more of the red and yellow and maybe a little bit of green look. So you just keep hitting randomize until you see something that you think will work well. So once you have something that works, you're going to hit OK, and then what we're going to do is we're going to draw the gradient from the left, from the center of our image, which is why we put in these guides, to the top or the bottom. Okay, you don't want to go left or right. If you go left or right, then the rings will be far outside of the top and the bottom, because your left and right are larger than the top and bottom. It's wider than it is tall. So you want to go from the center towards the top. So you click, hold down Shift, and then you drag up, and it will make rings from the center out, like so. Once you have that, then what we're going to do is need our elliptical marquee. So you're going to hit M on the keyboard to bring up your elliptical marquee, or you can just click on the marquee and then choose elliptical marquee tool. You want to create a brand new marquee. You want it to feather of 5 pixels. Anti-alias is checked. Our size is going to be normal because we're going to need to change its size depending on how big we want it to be. And that's all that we need for the options on our elliptical marquee. Now, what you need to do is figure out where you want your planet to be, because the planet is going to be the center of this. You need to figure out where your planet ends and the rings begin. So for this, we've got this big field here of green that is kind of boring to look at compared to all of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the hole here in the center only up until this end of the first dark circle here. So the way that I do that is I go to the center, I click with my mouse, and then I hold down Shift and Alt to constrain it to a circle, and I go out to about the edge of the brownish circle. So I now have a centered circular selection. I can then delete that by hitting Delete on my keyboard, and then I can hit Control D to deselect, and this is the area that our planet will sit. Now what I want to do, if you've ever looked at ringed planet photos, like of Saturn or of artistic renditions of ringed planets, there are usually spaces between some of the rings where space shows through. So the way that we do that is we still use the elliptical marquee, but we use the subtract from selection version of the elliptical marquee. So you click on that, which is the third icon here in these 4 icons. Feather stays the same, anti-alias is the same, and size normal stays the same. Now the way that this works is your first circle that you're going to make, the first selection, is going to be the outermost edge of this blank space in your rings. And then you're going to make another selection from the center out that goes to the innermost part of this empty ring that you're going to make. It's easier for me to show. Now, I don't like this big area of empty green here, so I'm going to make my first one towards the edge of that, maybe about here-ish, and then I'll make the second part of this blank space maybe right about there. So let me show you how this works. You click, you hold down Shift and Alt, and you go out to the outermost part that you want. So right about here-ish looks good to me. So that is now marking the outermost part of the area that I want to delete. So then I will click on the centermost part here and then hold down Shift and Alt, and I will grow this out and make an inner selection like so. And now all that's left of my selection is this ring that I can now delete by hitting Delete on my keyboard, and I have made a empty space for my rings. Then I can hit Control D to deselect that, and then I'm going to go way out over here to this area, and I'm going to get rid of a smaller sliver of that. So I'm going to click in the middle, I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt, I'm going to go out to about here-ish, I'm going to let go, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the innermost part of that circle. I'm going to click, hold down Shift and Alt to constrain it to a circle, and I'm going to go to about here-ish. And now I have another selection that I can just hit Delete on my keyboard to delete, and then hit Control D to deselect, and I have my rings ready for my planet. Okay, so then we want to go back to just a regular selection for our elliptical marquee, new selection. And what we're going to do is we're going to select almost all of these rings. So go back to the center point of your image, click, hold down Shift and Alt, drag it out until you reach the outer edge of your rings like this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to hit Control C to copy that. Then you're going to hit Control V to paste that in. You can then go to your gradient layer and you can delete it by dragging it down to the trash. And you now have your rings ready for your planet on their own separate layer. Let's rename this as rings. So double click on the name, type in rings, and you now have your rings layer. Once we are done with that, we need to transform these rings to fit around the planet properly. And they usually, it is usual to see them at a slight angle so that you can see most of the rings. Now, the way that you do that is you turn on the planet, then you select the rings layer so that you can see the rings properly. Then you're going to hit Control T on your keyboard to bring up the free transform tool. And we are then going to use 2 different versions of keyboard shortcut combo and your mouse. So what you're going to do at first is you're going to hold down Control, Alt, and Shift at the same time. And then you're going to go to the upper right-hand corner of your rings, and then you can click and drag it together to the left to make a perspective transform. And then you're going to keep holding down Control, Alt, and Shift, and you're going to go to the bottom right corner of the transform box, and you can drag that outwards from center, and you'll see that your rings are transforming. Then, let go of Control on the keyboard. So you're only holding down Shift and Alt. And you go to the top center of your transform box and you drag that down. And you'll see that we're getting more of the ring look that we want. Then hold down Control again so that you've got Shift, Alt, and Control, and drag in this way. And then still holding them down, drag out from the center like this. Bring your, hold down just Shift and Alt, and then bring your center down some so that it fits around the planet. And this looks pretty good. We could probably do a little bit more like this, and bring it in a little bit more. So holding down still just Shift and Alt to do this, and you now have rings around your planet. Okay, you can hit Enter to fix that so that it is now set in stone, the transformation, and we no longer need our center lines for the moment, so let us hide those by hitting Control H on the keyboard to hide our guidelines. So now what we see is a nice planet with rings, but the rings are in front of the planet when they should be behind the planet in the back. So the way that we're going to fix that is we're going to go to the Add Layer Mask. We're going to add a layer mask here to our rings layer. Then we are going to go to Planet, and we're going to hit Control on a keyboard and then click on the thumbnail of the planet. Once you do that, the planet is selected. And then since we are on the layer mask of the rings, we can then go to our brush tool, hitting B on the keyboard or going to the brush tool, select a soft round brush. Okay, about 125 pixels in size, and make sure that you are painting using black, so make sure black is your foreground, and then painting on the layer mask, you can paint away what is inside of your selection that you don't want. So see, if I go outside the selection and I'm painting, nothing happens. But inside the selection, everything goes away. So make sure not to go too low, because if you go too low, you will erase the rings that you want to see in front of the planet. But now the planet has no rings behind it. Once that is done, you can hit Control D to deselect, and your ringed planet is just about ready. What it's missing, though, is a shadow back here. Now, this is just an added little bonus. Let's say that you've got your rings, but you're not really happy with their color. There's an easy way to fix that. You just go down here to rings, and you add in a layer of hue saturation, an adjustment layer above the rings. And then you can make sure that the adjustment layer is clipped to just the rings layer. And the way that we do that is we hold down Alt on the keyboard and hover the mouse in between the hue saturation layer and the rings layer, and it will change into this little box with an arrow. Click once it's that box, and the changes that you make will only affect the layer below. So now we can change its hue to make it a little bit more yellowy, like so. And that's all that we really need to do. Now we can change its saturation some to bring it down a little bit. And there, that looks pretty good. So if you want to change the colors of your rings because you're just not happy with the colors as they're showing, it's easy enough to do that using the hue saturation adjustment layer. Just make sure that you clip it to just affecting the rings layer and not the entire image. Once you're happy with that, you can leave it alone, and you're done with the rings for now. What you do need to do, though, like I said, is create a shadow on the rings. And the way that we do that is we're going to create a brand new layer here above our hue saturation or our rings layer. We're going to double click on that, and we're going to name it Shadow. Okay, once we have that done, we are going to hold down Control and click on the thumbnail of the planet to make a perfect circle the size of the planet. We are then going to fill that selection on the shadow layer with black by hitting Alt and backspace. And black is now filling. So hit Control D to deselect. And then we are going to bring back... no, we're not. We are going to now transform this. So let me bring back my move tool so you can see my arrow. We are going to transform this shadow. So we're going to hit Control T on the keyboard to bring up Free Transform. And we are going to also change the opacity of the shadow layer. I forgot to mention this, but it's easy enough to do. You don't have to come out of transforming. You can still change the opacity while you're in the transformation mode just by clicking on opacity and scrolling down until it is about 50%. So 50% looks good. You can see through it, so that's how we will know exactly where our shadow is sitting on everything. So we're going to hold down Shift and Alt, and we're going to grab the top of our shadow transformation, and we're going to bring it together. And then we're going to grab the left and the right, and we're going to drag it all the way out so it's nice and big. And then we are going to zoom in. Now, the simple way to zoom in while you're doing this is you hold down Alt on the keyboard and you use your mouse wheel, if you have a wheel on your mouse, to scroll in on your image. If you don't have that, you can go down here to the and just type in how much zoom that you want on the lower left-hand side of your image. But I like to use the mouse wheel, so just hold down Alt and zoom in until you can see well enough to move this transformation box. Hold down Shift to move it in a straight line, and you move it up until the bottom of it is just touching the innermost ring. Okay, once you have that, then you just drag the top layer down until it is just above the innermost ring over here, so that you can see that it's similar to what it would look like on this side. Okay, so something like this looks good. All right, once you have that, you can zoom back out by holding down Alt and then zooming out. All right, and it looks like this is a little bit too big here, so let's hold down Shift and Alt and drag this in a little bit until we've got it about there-ish, and then we can hit Enter, and we are ready with our shadow behind our planet. Now, if you don't like where the shadow lies, let's say you want it more to be up this way, or your shadows you've changed so that they're coming in this way and your sun is over here kind of thing, you can just transform it and turn it until it reaches where you want it to be. For my purposes, this looks very nice as a shadow. So the way that we are going to make this look more like a real shadow, because right now it's over the left-hand side, it's over the planet, it's in the spaces in between the rings. We don't want any of that. So the simplest and easiest way to get rid of most of this shadow is you hold down Control, and you click on the rings layer to make a selection of the rings. Then on the shadow layer, making sure that your shadow layer is selected, you go down to Add Layer Mask and you just click Add Layer Mask. And then it gets rid of all of the shadow that is not on the rings themselves. So there's no more shadow in here in the black space, there's no more shadow really on the planet, there's a little bit over here, and there's shadow here on the rings. But we need to get rid of this area of shadow, and we want to get rid of some of the shadow here because we only want to see it where there's shadow on the planet. So you're going to go to your brush tool by hitting B on the keyboard or by selecting the brush tool. A soft round brush is fine. 125 is a fine size. Make sure that you're using black, and make sure that the layer mask of shadow is selected. Then just paint away the shadow that you don't want. So there you go. And if you make a mistake, all you have to do is hit X on the keyboard to switch your foreground and background color from black to white, and then you can paint it back if you decide that you want two suns and you want to have your shadow on both sides, which I don't. So I'm going to get rid of those by clicking and doing that. Now over here, you want to zoom in a little bit, so Alt and using my zoom wheel. And then what you want to do, you see that the shadow starts about here, right? So we got to get rid of the shadow here. So you're just going to come in like that and slowly get rid of the shadow like that. And if you want to keep it, like I said, hit X, and there goes the shadow again. And now you've got, if I zoom back out, a ringed planet with a shadow in space. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. I do new tutorials every Tuesday. Once again, I am Geekman signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.